Hey guys, it's Chris. From the ugliest mermaids you'll ever see to the mysterious monolith that showed up and vanished in Utah, here are 10 of the most bizarre, weird, and shocking archaeological discoveries of all time. Number 10. The Fiji Mermaid. The Fiji Mermaid has been baffling people for centuries. This horrific monster has a face that looks like an old man's, as well as distorted fingers, tiny little teeth, and a weird body. Truly, it is the stuff of nautical nightmares. It's apparently been around since 1842, when it was a strange freak show being exhibited at circuses all across the country. To this day, the same frightening creature can be found all over the internet, grinning at you from different angles. But this freak show has a very rich history. It was allegedly caught in the South Pacific, near the Fiji Islands, and many replicas of it have been made to this day. But if you want to know what the Fiji Mermaid really is, well, prepare to be grossed out. The disgusting mermaid thing that you see all over the net is actually a monkey body sewn onto a fish's tail, and it was first crafted by a fisherman as an interesting display piece. The disgusting hybrid creature was eventually sold though, and then dragged around the United States and showed to people as a factual oddity, when of course no such beast has ever really existed. Unfortunately, the original Fiji mermaid disappeared sometime in the 1800s when the museum it was living in burned down, but to this day you can still find many great replicas of this horrendous beast. And no end of conspiracy theories surrounding it either. Number 9. Vampire Grave. Here is an even weirder story than the mermaid. In the Lafayette Cemetery, buried in the poorest section of the graveyard, there is entombed a possible vampire. The vampire's name was Theodore Glava, and he was a Transylvanian immigrant who went to America to seek a better life. However, he likely died after a pretty bleak life as a coal miner in the middle of the 1918 flu epidemic. He was buried in the Lafayette Cemetery in Colorado. But it wasn't until many years after his death that Theodore Glava became famous. Everybody knows that Transylvania, which is actually just a region inside of Romania, is synonymous with vampires. And apparently it was synonymous with vampires back in the early 1900s as well. The settlers were untrusting enough without a tall and very pale man from the land of vampires showing up in their town. According to local legends, the townspeople actually dug up this guy's grave and found that he had blood around his mouth and abnormally large teeth and fingernails. Then the settlers stabbed him in the heart with a stake and reburied him. While this definitely seems like something a group of paranoid settlers could have done, it might actually be true. A tree has been discovered, growing straight through the grave plot where Theodore is buried. Rumors say that the tree grew out of the wooden stake that had been stabbed through his chest. So what's the most bizarre thing you've ever found in your travels? Some abandoned gas station, or perhaps an animal skull somewhere it shouldn't have been? Or something maybe even more spooky and shocking? Let me know what you found in the comments section below. And then be sure to subscribe to World List for more amazing videos just like this one. Number 8. Alien Remains. A mermaid, a vampire, and now an alien. Deep in the wilds of Peru, researchers have discovered what's being referred to as proof of extraterrestrial life. The body of something almost human but not quite has been discovered with a skull shaped like a triangle, nearly 20 inches tall. The skull is almost the size of the being's actual body. There hasn't been a lot of information revealed about where the skull was found or how, but we can be sure that the images are likely real. Some professionals are saying that the remains likely belong to a child that was born with an unusually shaped head, or others are saying that it's actually the body of an alien. It could have been one of the aliens that helped the ancient South American people to build such incredible monuments. Then again, it could have just been a child that had its skull squished between some wooden slats to give it a longer skull. Unfortunately, there have not been enough scientific investigations into this skull yet to determine the truth, but just looking at its oversized eye sockets makes you think it's an alien. Even if it had been a child with an elongated skull, there's no accounting for the huge eye sockets. As of right now, this might be the closest thing we have on the planet to physical evidence of alien beings. Number 7. The Tunnels of BAIE. The city of BAIE was one of the most hedonistic places in ancient Rome. It was a seaside resort visited by the wealthiest people in the empire, including many of Rome's ancient rulers like Caesar and Nero. It was apparently the most debaucherous place in all of Europe, at least until volcanic activity resulted in the ancient resort being swallowed by the sea. It's now located completely underground. And the only way to visit it is by strapping on some diving equipment and getting wet. But there is an even greater mystery here. In 1932, a previously unknown chamber was discovered by an Italian archaeologist near the flooded city. Then, in the 1960s, the chamber was fully explored. It turned out to be a complex system of underground tunnels. Apparently, these mysterious tunnels had once been constructed to mimic the mythical Greek underworld, as if traveling into Hades. Within the underground system of tunnels is a sulfurous stream which would have represented the river Styx. The archaeologist that discovered and explored the tunnel believes that the Romans probably used the tunnel system for some kind of ritual purpose, likely ferrying people across the sulfurous stream and even deeper into the tunnel complex to a hidden sanctuary where a mysterious ritual probably took place. However, because of the awful shape of the tunnels and all the erosion and devastation that has taken place over time, it's proved impossible to fully excavate the site. Number 6. Weird mummies. One of the strangest and by far the most gruesome discoveries involves the work of a man named Girolamo Sagato, also known as the Petrifier. This guy was a cartographer, Egyptologist, and a naturalist. In the year 1818, he went on an expedition to Egypt where he learned of mummification. After returning to Italy, he became obsessed with the technique for preserving human remains. But he wanted to do an even better job than the Egyptians had. He ended up creating a way to make dead people look fresh. He was so successful that people began to whisper that he had learned Egyptian black magic and was practicing it on his subjects. This caused him to be ostracized and ridiculed and basically kicked out of the scientific community. But what's really strange is that Girolamo never mummified a full body. He only ever practiced using hands, feet, brains, heads, small animals, and even fetuses. But whatever he practiced on, he did manage to preserve incredibly well, turning any human body part into a perfect fossil. The few of his relics still remaining can be found at the Museum of the Department of Anatomy in Florence. But as for the unique technique of how he petrified organs and human body parts, well, that's all been lost. Girolamo became paranoid. He ended up burning all of his notes on how to turn dead bodies into stone, and then he died shortly after. Number 5. Shackled skeletons. A recent archaeological discovery in Greece has revealed 36 skeletons still in their shackles that could have been slaughtered rebels from a failed coup in Athens in the year 632 BC. The discovery was found in the ancient port city of Phaleron, roughly 4 miles from Athens. Inside the mass grave were 80 skeletons, all of them lined next to each other and 36 of them still bound in iron chains. Researchers are thinking that these slaughtered people likely followed someone named Cylon, an old tyrant who tried to take over Athens and failed miserably. By investigating the teeth of the skeletons, researchers were able to identify them as young people in good health. This helps with the theory that they were political rebels intent on governmental change. According to Smithsonian Magazine, this was a time in which Athens was in turmoil because of poor harvests and serious social inequality. The coup began in 1632, but most of the city wasn't that interested. The rebels were forced to run away and take shelter, but they were eventually captured and slaughtered. And while there's no direct evidence that these recently discovered skeletons were part of the coup, archaeologists believe it's the most logical explanation. Number 4. Frankenstein bog bodies. Nothing is quite as freaky as the Frankenstein bog bodies. In 2001, 4 skeletons were discovered on an island in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. These skeletons appeared to have come from the Bronze Age, and at first it seemed like a pretty normal burial. However, after some tests were done, researchers realized something was seriously wrong. First, the people buried didn't die at the same time. Tests showed that they died roughly 300 years apart. Further studies showed that the bodies were not even buried after their death. For example, one skeleton showed that it hadn't been buried until about 600 years after its original time of death. This is highly unusual because why would you leave a body sitting there to rot and not bury it for hundreds of years? It then turned out that the bodies had likely been preserved intentionally inside of a peat bog, then later retrieved and buried. Further tests revealed something even stranger. It turned out that the bodies were built from pieces of many different people, just like Frankenstein's monster. One skeleton proved to be constructed of 6 different individuals. This has led experts to believe that the bodies were retrieved from the bog and then stitched together like a jigsaw puzzle. However, nobody has any idea why this happened. To this day, it's a major mystery that no one can solve. It was either some kind of psychotic lunatic or some kind of forgotten ritual. Number 3. The mysterious Andrewsarchus beast. The Andrewsarchus is one of the biggest mysteries in the world of paleontology. In 1923, a group of researchers went on an expedition into Inner Mongolia. They were in a place called the Valley of the Jewels when they made an extraordinary discovery. They found a superb skull that had belonged to a giant beast. The expedition leader described the skull as being roughly 3 feet long with huge teeth. One of the paleontologists on the team declared that the skull belonged to a group of extinct pigs, but another said the skull probably belonged to an unknown carnivore. The skull was named after the leader of the expedition, and it was taken back to civilization and studied. The Andrewsarchus skull found in Mongolia is now the only specimen of its kind ever uncovered. This is incredible because the creature probably lived as recently as 45 million years ago. So that means there should be way more specimens close to the surface of the Earth. This is made even more incredible by the fact that the skull belonged to a ferocious beast that stood roughly 6 feet high at its shoulders and was 12 feet long. This would make it the largest carnivorous land mammal that ever existed. So that's got me thinking, what else is out there? Number 2. Ancient stone circles. For whatever reason, circles are endlessly mysterious. Whether we're talking about stone monoliths or crop circles, they're always baffling and bizarre. In the Middle East, researchers have discovered huge stone circles that they can't explain. Archaeologists in Jordan have captured high-resolution images from the air of 11 giant circles scattered across the country, measuring about 1,300 feet in diameter. All 11 of the circles have such a similar diameter that researchers don't believe it could be a coincidence. According to Live Science, archaeologists are calling the phenomenon the Big Circles. They were likely structures built with low stone walls and no openings. People would have to crawl over the walls just to get inside of these huge structures. The evidence suggested that these stone circles date back at least 2,000 years, but scientists say they could be even older. They could even date back to before writing was invented. And even though they were originally spotted in the 1920s, after all these years we still don't know the first thing about their purpose. Don't know who constructed the circles or what they were used for. Number 1. The mysterious Utah monolith. If you were paying attention to the news in 2020, which most of us were, you might remember the story of a hiker discovering a mysterious monolith in the Utah desert. So far as the story goes, the tall silver monolith was originally discovered by accident in the Red Rock Desert. Photos were uploaded online, and hikers and curious people immediately began flocking to the site to get a look at the strange monolith, which, by the way, looked a lot like the mysterious silver rectangle from the Stanley Kubrick film 2001: A Space Odyssey. However, the monolith was mysteriously removed. Before long, it had simply vanished. Nobody knew what happened until, according to ABC News, a group of friends shared their photos online. They apparently showed up in the middle of the night to try and see the monolith, only to come face to face with the mysterious people taking it down. 3 men dressed in black who didn't say a word quickly took down the monument and vanished into the darkness with it. But not before the group of friends snapped some photos. But even after all the attention, nobody knows who put the monolith there or who came and picked it up in the middle of the night. It's a total mystery. So which one of these discoveries is the most fascinating to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to World List for all the latest videos.